The diathesis stress model, an interactionist approach of schizophrenia. AA1. The original model diathesis vulnerability was a result of a gene called the schizogene. This would then develop into schizotypic personality, which was reactive to stress. People who carried this gene were subjected to high amounts of stress throughout their childhood, and adulthood would further develop symptoms of schizophrenia. There is now a modern understanding of diathesis. Through more research, it's clear that a number of genes can contribute to the genetic vulnerability of schizophrenia. There is also a range of biological factors, such as psychological trauma, which means that the trauma will increase a person's vulnerability rather than the stressor. Studies have highlighted how severe trauma can affect the development of a brain, i.e. the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal system can become overactive, which can increase vulnerability to stress. In earlier diathesis stress model, stress was seen as a psychological factor, including life events. Modern models now define stress as anything which can trigger schizophrenia to occur, such as smoking cannabis. Cannabis users are 7 times more likely to develop schizophrenia as it interferes with the dopamine system. A key study to highlight this comes from Tianari et al. Evidence to support the dual of vulnerability and stress in the development of schizophrenia comes from Tianari et al. They investigated the combination of genetic vulnerability and parenting style, the trigger, using children adopted from 19,000 Finnish mothers with schizophrenia. The adoptive parents' parenting styles were assessed and compared with the control group of adoptees with a genetic risk. A child rearing style with high levels of criticism and conflict and low levels of empathy was implicated in the development of schizophrenia, but only for children with a high genetic risk. This suggests that people with genetic vulnerability and family-related stress combined are likely to get schizophrenia. This is very strong and direct support for the interactionist approach. This increases its validity. A method point is that they used a large sample. A methodological strength of the research by Tianari et al. Study is that it used a large sample size. By using children adopted from 19,000 Finnish mothers, we're able to generalize the results because the data can be applied to a large amount of people. This increases the support for research into the diathesis stress model for schizophrenia. However, it is too simplistic. One limitation of the original diathesis stress model is it's too simplistic. Multiple genes increase vulnerability, each with a small effect on its own. There is no schizogene. Stress comes in many forms, including dysfunctional parenting. Researchers now believe that stress can include biological factors. For example, it's been found that childhood sexual trauma was a diathesis and cannabis use a trigger. This suggests that the old idea of diathesis as biological and stress as psychological has turned out to be overly simple. This reduces the validity of the original diathesis stress model. Treatment according to the interactionist approach. Researchers suggest that it is possible to believe in biological causes of schizophrenia and still practice CBT to relieve psychological symptoms. But this requires adopting an interactionist model. It is not possible to adopt a purely biological approach, tell patients that their condition is purely biological, with no psychological significance to their symptoms, and then treat them with CBT. The UK adopts a more interactionist approach compared to the US. In Britain, an increasingly standard practice to treat patients with a combination of drugs and CBT. In the US, there's more conflict between psychological and biological models of schizophrenia, and this may lead to slower adoption of the interactionist approach. Usefulness of the interactionist approach. Another strength of the interactionist approach is its usefulness in treatment. Taria et al. Randomly allocated 315 patients to a medication and CBT group. Patients in the two combination groups showed lower symptom levels than those in the control group, which was medication only, but there was no difference in hospital readmission. Studies like this show that there is a clear practical advantage in adopting an interactionist approach in the form of superior treatment outcomes. This increases the appropriateness of the interactionist model as it has real-life applications.